Welcome to the deep dive. Ever find yourself looking at service providers, especially ones handling data, and wonder, well, how do you really know they've got their act together?
That's where SOC engagements usually come in.
Exactly. System and organization controls reports. Today we're diving into those, trying to cut through some of the complexity.
Yeah, they can seem a bit dense if you're not familiar.
Right. So whether you're prepping for a meeting, just curious about how this assurance stuff works, or maybe evaluating a vendor, this should help.
Yeah.
We'll focus on SOC1 and SOC2 mainly.
The two big ones, definitely. SOC1 looks at controls impacting financial reporting for the user.
Okay.
And SOC2 is broader. It's about trust, security, availability, confidentiality, those kinds of criteria.
Got it. So the core piece is an auditor's opinion, Russ. What exactly are they forming an opinion on?
Well, fundamentally, they need enough good evidence. That's step one. And they assess if any slip-ups they find are actually material.
Significant.
Material enough to matter. Precisely. Then their opinion focuses on a few key things. Is management's description of their system fair?
Like, does it accurately show what they do?
Yes. And are the controls they say they have suitably designed? Do they make sense on paper?
Okay.
And then for a Type 2 report, there's a third piece. Did those controls actually work effectively over the review period?
So Type 1 is design. Type 2 adds operating effectiveness.
You got it. And remember, SOC1 ties this all back to the user's financial reporting, while SOC2 links it to those trust service criteria, security, availability, etc.
Okay, so what kinds of opinions can they give? Is it just pass-fail?
Not quite that simple. The best is an unmodified opinion. That's the clean report. It basically says, yep, in all material respects, the description is fair, the controls are designed well, and for Type 2, they operated effectively.
The gold standard.
Right. And this assumes any necessary complementary control stuff the user have to do or a subservice provider are identified.
Okay, what if it's not clean? What are the other options?
Then you get a modified opinion. There are three main types. First is qualified. Think except for.
Meaning
Meaning there's a specific issue, maybe in the description or design or testing for Type 2 that's material, important, but doesn't wreck the whole system view. Or maybe the auditor couldn't get enough evidence on one specific part.
Okay, an isolated problem.
Kind of, yeah. Material but not pervasive. Then there's adverse. That's bad.
How bad?
It means the problems, misstatements, or control deficiencies are both material and pervasive. Widespread issues. The description might be misleading, or controls are fundamentally flawed.
Yikes. Okay, and the last one.
A disclaimer. That's where the auditor basically says, I can't give an opinion, usually because they were severely limited in what they could review, a major scope limitation. They just couldn't get enough evidence to form any conclusion.
So qualified is mostly okay, but adverse is nope, big problems, and disclaimer is we couldn't even tell.
That's a pretty good summary, yeah. It depends if the issue is just material or material and pervasive.
Gotcha. So beyond the opinion itself, what else is in a typical SOC report?
Well, you always get management's own description of their system. That's foundational.
What they say they do.
Exactly. And importantly, management also provides a written assertion. Basically, they state that their description is fair, controls are designed okay, and for Type 2, operated effectively.
Their formal sign-off.
Right. Then comes the independent auditor's report. That's where the opinion lives. And for Type 2, you'll see the section detailing the tests the auditor performed and what they found.
Let's quickly touch on that management description. What kind of stuff is in there, say for SOC2?
For SOC2, you'll see the services, sure, but also their main promises, service commitments, and system requirements. The components of their system, infrastructure, software, people.
The nuts and bolts.
Any system incidents they identified, which trust criteria apply security, availability, etc. And critically, those CUECs, complementary user entity controls.
Things the customer needs to do.
Yes. And info on subservice organizations, are they included or carved out? Plus, for Type 2, changes during the period. SOC1 is similar, but focused through that financial reporting lens.
And that management assertion is non-negotiable.
Pretty much. If management refuses to provide it, the auditor generally has to withdraw or issue a disclaimer. It's a required piece.
Makes sense. Okay, the auditor's actual report section. What are the key parts?
It has a standard structure. Title, who it's for, the scope, what period, what system. Crucially, it outlines management's responsibilities and the auditor's responsibilities.
Hitting the stage.
Right. It mentions inherent limitations. No system is perfect. For Type 2, it describes the tests. Then comes the opinion paragraph itself, covering description, design, and for Type 2, operating effectiveness.
And often a restriction on who can use the report.
Yes, usually. And look for mentions of subservice organizations and CUECs the opinion needs to address if they're needed.
You mentioned subservice organizations, vendors the service provider uses. What's the carve-out versus inclusive thing?
Okay, so if the service provider relies on, say, a data center provider, they have two choices. Carve-out means the report mentions the data center, describes their role generally, but the auditor doesn't test the data center's controls.
So you just know they exist.
Right. The service provider's controls related to monitoring the data center might be tested, but not the data center itself. Inclusive means the data center's relevant controls are included in the scope and tested by the service auditor.
It sounds like more work, but maybe more assurance.
It can be, yeah. Depends on the situation. The report language changes depending on the method used.
Got it. And one last clarification, CUECs and CSOCs.
Right. CUECs, complementary user entity controls, are things you, the customer or user entity, need to have in place for the service organization's controls to fully work. It's your part of the deal.
Like setting strong passwords for our users accessing their service.
Exactly. CSOCs, complementary subservice organization controls, are similar, but it's controls at that subservice organization, the vendor's vendor, that the main service provider relies on and assumes are working.
Ah, okay. And the report calls these out.
Yes, the auditor's opinion has to state if achieving the control objectives or service commitments depends on these CUECs or CSOCs being implemented.
Okay, wrapping this up then. SOC reports, SOC1 for finance impact, SOC2 for trust criteria, they give vital assurance. The opinion unmodified, qualified, adverse disclaimer tells you the auditor's verdict on the description, design, and maybe operation.
And paying attention to how they handle subservice providers and what your responsibilities are, the CUECs, is really key to understanding the full picture.
Definitely, it really shifts how you might look at a potential vendor or service.
Absolutely. It equips you to ask much more specific, pointed questions about their controls and reliability based on what their report actually says or maybe doesn't say.
That's a great point. So the thought to leave you with, thinking about the services you use daily, maybe your cloud storage, your payroll provider.
Right.
What questions does this raise for you now about their controls? Are you curious what their SOC report might say? That's your deep dive for today. Thanks for tuning in.